Hey, put your lawyer hat on. What can this guy sue the Lions for not having security, the Steelers, or when you go to a game, do you forfeit that right? Like, how does that work possibly for a fan and you just got, I don't know, you want to call that assault or whatever that happened at a football game?
I remember the first time I went to a game and studied the back of the ticket. They put so much crap on the back of the ticket that is probably not enforceable if it came down to it. And there are certain risks you assume by going to a game. There are certain risks that you don't assume, like a player coming over to the stands and yanking you down and punching you. Now, there's another video, and we played it earlier, where the fan's kind of like, yeah, that's what I wanted. This fan specifically would have a technical lawsuit, a technical claim for assault and or battery, but there's no damages. No lawyer is going to take on that case. There's no money to be recovered from DK Metcalf because the guy wasn't injured. From the league's perspective, this is where the concern should be, because the next guy could be the one who does get pulled over the railing and break his neck when he hits the, concrete hard stadium floor, or the guy who the punch ends up giving him the Jake Paul two broken jaws thing. And then you've got a real problem. And here's what would happen, Devin. In the next case, they can't say, we have no idea anything like that could occur. And, in the next case, and I guarantee you it would be an issue, not punishing DK Metcalf, not taking appropriate remedial steps after you saw what DK Metcalf did, that set the stage for this one. That's a very typical, and think about it, it's commonsensical, and it applies in any business, right? Let's say that there's condensation outside of the ice cream cooler at the grocery store, and somebody slipped and fell on the condensation, and they didn't get hurt, but the person slipped and fell. Grocery store owner knows we got to do something about this condensation on the floor by the ice cream cooler. And if you don't do anything about it and somebody slips and falls and breaks their neck, breaks their hip, breaks whatever, the lawyers are going to find that, and the lawyers are going to use that. So that's where it's a legal issue for the NFL. As it relates to this guy, no. If you don't do anything about it, the next time it happens, you get a major, major problem. And that was the point of the item I wrote last night. The NFL had no choice but to suspend him, and Roger Goodell or whoever gets this appeal, they have no choice but to uphold the 2-game suspension, because you got to think about the next time something like this happens, even as every team takes pains now to make sure there's a buffer there that a player can't get through.
But you don't think they could take it to one game? It still would be discipline, a penalty, 1-game suspension. Because I just think, does it not matter at all that Week 18 game, them versus Baltimore, possibly for the last playoff spot? Do you think they just throw all of that totally out because this is a player and a fan incident?
Well, if we go down that path, then we have to accept the possibility that they make other disciplinary decisions based on competitive reasons. I'd like to think they don't. I'd like to think they make their discipline decisions based on the facts, based on what happened, without regard to, this is a pretty important game this weekend. We probably should suspend this guy, but the game is in prime time on ABC and ESPN. We'd kind of like to have that guy available for the game so more people will watch. And I think they've made us cynical in that way that we think about those things, right? But ideally, that won't matter. Ideally, the right thing to do is suspend him. The amount they've decided, they've come up with 2 games. Let's stick with 2 games. I think the NFL also has a concern about looking wishy-washy. Like, we are the body that has issued the suspension, and we are the body ultimately run by the commissioner who is going to decide the appeal. Why are you changing your mind? It's one thing if it's a hearing officer who's jointly hired and compensated by the league and the union. If Derek Brooks says, 2 games, no, we're going to make it 1, that's got a different vibe to it. It looks like the NFL doesn't have its act together. Because I suspect for something like this, the commissioner's already signed off on the 2-game suspension. I'd like to think at some point in the day on Monday, given the unusual nature of the incident, that someone went to the commissioner and said, hey, you see this that happened yesterday? Yeah, I did. What's going on? Hey, I'd like to think the commissioner's first concern is going to be, how in the hell did this happen? Not what should we do about it, but how did we let this happen? And then at some point in the day, he's going to say, we got to sit this guy down for 2 games. There's no way they suspended him 2 games without the commissioner already agreeing to it. And he's the one who's going to hear the appeal. So unless DK Metcalf finds somebody to come in there and just, put on a hell of a presentation to convince the commissioner that he was wrong the first time around, I don't think this gets reduced, Devin.
Yeah, they're all valid points. I think for me, because not realizing the difference in, the suspension and who you go to, I've always thought of like certain fines or suspensions. I've always felt like it already thought about the appeal. So at different points, guys getting suspended for X amount of games for hits or different things, or fine X amount of money. I've always thought there was kind of we know this player is going to appeal, so we're going to go a little heavier because we're going to come back down. But I understand the difference in this situation. I just hate to see this, and it's a part of this is why team sports matter. This is why team sports are so great, because one person's individual decision can harm the team. Like you said it as we were here, and we were just talking about the Patriots and Baltimore, a little bit of Baltimore probably being out of the playoffs, and then you threw in, well, possibly not, because as good as the Steelers look, like DK Metcalf is such a huge part of that. And it's crazy to think, though, like depending on how all this works out, we could be sitting here in a Week 18 game with this is the deciding factor, who gets in the playoffs, and the Steelers could be without their best offensive weapon. And I think of that because of we're in it. Like we're talking about the playoffs and who's going to get in, who's going to get out. But I mean, the truth of the matter is that's a big deal. Like there was a punch thrown at a fan. And I am very interested to see how this all plays out, because I think I saw you wrote about like the implications too when it comes to his contract and guarantee money, and like this one split decision can have such an impact on this year, his future in Pittsburgh, the guarantee money. Like it's terrible, because it's such a dumb action to happen in the middle of a game that your team actually played their butts off, got a win in Detroit to set yourself up to be in the playoffs, and now they're dealing with this. And every question today, every question tomorrow when they come into the building is only going to be about DK Metcalf suspension, and then at the end of it, they'll get 2 questions on the game Sunday, but it'll be all about DK.
And I'm glad you mentioned the financial side of it. And I like the fact that you said that, you may have seen it on PFT. I would have appreciated it if there was a little more conviction. Like, I definitely saw the article and it was awesome. Like, that would have been better. But that's okay. You're not a paid spokesperson yet for ProFootballTalk.com. The money he's going to lose the next 2 weeks, he's got a $5 million salary for this year. You do the math, and it's very simple. It's 18 installments because the bye week counts. You take the 18, you divide it by 2. No, you divide it by 9. What I always do is I take the salary, divide it by 18, multiply it by 2 in this case. $555,555. That's gone. That's never coming back. He's never being paid that money. That's what he's going to lose the next 2 games if the suspension, as I expect it to be, is upheld on appeal. Here's where it gets interesting and possibly very expensive for DK Metcalf. And I spent more time than I wanted last night reading the CBA, tracking down his contract language, trying to figure out how it all fits together. And some of it was a refresher because I've done this before, but then you don't do it for 2 or 3 years, and you got to go back and figure out how to do it all over again. Number one, he got a $30 million signing bonus on a 5-year deal. That's a 6-year allocation for each of the 5 years. That's how it works. You earn it $6 million at a time for 5 years. If you commit what they call a forfeitable breach in any of those years, right off the bat, they can take back 25% of your allocation for that year. So you get suspended for conduct detrimental to the NFL. They can come after 25% of $6 million, which is $1.5 million. Boom. If they want to, and the contract preserves their ability to get the maximum forfeitable breach under the CBA, they can say, hey, DK, sorry, you're going to miss the next 2 games. By the way, we want $1.5 million back. And if they want to really play hardball, or if they don't think he's living up to the contract, that's the other side of it. It's not just we want to be jerks here and send a message. It's, is he really living up to $35 million a year new money deal? Is he really living up to that? They can pull the plug on $25 million fully guaranteed for next year. Fully guaranteed. That's why I say the only full guarantee is the money they put in your pocket. And even then, there's no guarantee you're going to get to keep it. But $25 million, they can void it. Gone. If this suspension sticks. Now, if he'd been suspended for 2 games or less for violating the playing rules, doesn't void. He was suspended for conduct detrimental to the league. There's no 2-game minimum for that under his contract. Void, $25 million. And he's got a $20 million injury guarantee in 2027. That would go away too. So this thing will cost, if the Steelers choose to play hardball and push this, $27.55 million gone for DK Metcalf. So now I don't know if it's going to come to that, but that alone should be incentive enough. And I'd like to think every guy in the NFL understands how I could lose my money. And I mean, I know that, you know, and if I'm in my early 20s, I don't know, I'm thinking about that, and hopefully have somebody around you who explains it to you. These are the ways you could possibly lose some of this money. And it's a lot of that money that DK Metcalf could lose, Devin, if the Steelers decide to pursue it.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. Throughout my whole career, I never thought twice about what a suspension would do to my money. Even though I know when you get suspended, you could void your guarantee money in your contract. I've seen players get released because they got suspended. And again, depending on the language in your contract, suspended for, you know, they took Adderall, which comes up as a performance enhancement drug. They got suspended for it. That voided guarantee money. Team released them, moved on. Like, you see it, but I know for me personally, when I was playing, I was like, I'm not getting suspended for anything. Like, getting suspended voids my money. That's my decision to go get suspended. So I don't know how many guys think about how a suspension could affect their actual contract. So again, I feel like I highly doubt DK has ever thought about, hey, if I get suspended for doing something and it's conduct detrimental to the league or to the team, like, I just don't think he thought about that. And I don't know many guys who have. Maybe guys who, you know, had a history of being suspended for different things. That was probably important to them or their agent of what that language looks like in the contract. But overall, you just don't walk away thinking, like, I'm going to get suspended. So it's just, again, it's a dumb thing that could have a trickle-down effect on the individual, the team. Like, it can turn into such a mess. And I know if I was watching us right now, I'd be like, this is a waste of conversation. They're not releasing DK Metcalf. Like, DK Metcalf is a hell of a player. But, like, the way everything works out, who you could get next, like, there's just so much that teams, when this offseason hits or whenever they got to make this decision, they go down everything. They want to know everything. Like, we see guys get those brand new great contracts, and I know you're always breaking it down. What is the actual numbers? What does this really look like? We've seen it where guys get these big contracts, play 1 year, and there's an out in there, and the team gets out. And it's not that the guy was so bad. It's just, as we look at this contract, there's a way out, and there's a possibility where we think we can make our team better by taking that money and putting it somewhere else on our team. So who knows what happens in Pittsburgh next, but just know for right now, especially if this determines a reason that they possibly don't get into the playoffs, like, I can't imagine what happens in Pittsburgh if that happens for this season.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, yes, at first blush, they're not going to get rid of this guy that just paid him all the money. But This gives them an out they didn't previously have. That's why you try to get multiple years of a contract guaranteed. You want 2 years, maybe 3 years if you can get it. This makes it a 1-year guarantee, and they can get away from the $25 million and the injury risk that they carry of another $20 million beyond that. This gives them a way to do it, and teams are always thinking there is no real loyalty. It's a football machine, and every part is going to get removed at some point. And every year, Devin, as you say, they look at all the parts, and they look at, I wonder if we should keep that part another year. And it's a very hard and stressful thing, and it's an unforgiving business because there's other guys out there who are cheaper, healthier, younger, and we're going to put that part in. We're going to do it at some point. Maybe we do it now. So if DK Metcalf isn't delivering the way they thought he would, and we don't know what's going on behind the steel curtain in Pittsburgh because they don't typically yap about it. How's he been in the meeting rooms? How's he been with Aaron Rodgers? How's he been with Mike Tomlin, the guy who's been scarred by A.B. Brown, scarred apparently enough by George Pickens to trade him? Instead, right, they got rid of him instead. They didn't need DK Metcalf. They had George Pickens, for crying out loud. They move on from Pickens. They welcome in DK Metcalf. If DK Metcalf has been a pain in their ass, and I'm not saying he has been, that's a factor too. All I'm saying is if he has been, we don't know. And we may not know until they decide to void his guarantees and tear up the contract after 1 year, which we need to just watch. If the suspension is upheld, and I believe it will be, that's something we need to watch. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.